Daniel Carter stood in the center of the massive council chamber, his hands clasped behind his back. The room was enormous, built to hold representatives from 47 different alien species. Above him, the curved ceiling showed the stars beyond the station, a reminder that they were floating in neutral space, far from any home world. The chamber was not friendly today. Daniel could feel the hostility in the air like static electricity before a storm. Alien eyes of every color and shape watched him from the tiered seating that rose up on all sides. Some species whispered to each other in languages his translator struggled to process. Others simply stared with what he recognized as contempt. Sophie Clark sat at the human delegation table behind him, her fingers moving quickly across her data pad. She was recording everything, every word and gesture. Brooks sat beside her, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Brooks was their military, a career officer who understood strategy and power. Right now, he looked like he wanted to leap across the floor and start a fight he could never win. High Adjudicator rose from his seat at the head of the council. The leader was tall and covered in dark purple scales that caught the light when he moved. His eyes were cold and yellow, like a snake's. He had led the charge against humanity for the past 3 months, ever since the accusations started. "The charges are clear," said, his voice amplified through the chamber's sound system. "Humanity has stolen advanced technology from the Imperium. They have violated trade agreements. They have proven themselves untrustworthy and dangerous." Daniel wanted to scream that it was all lies. They had fabricated every piece of evidence. They had planted false data, bribed witnesses, and manipulated the council. But he had already presented Earth's defense. He had shown proof of human innovation, demonstrated that every technology they possessed had been developed independently or traded for legally. The council had not cared about truth. They cared about maintaining their power structure. "Ambassador Carter," continued, "do you have any final words before we vote?" Daniel stepped forward. His legs were steady even though his heart pounded in his chest. He had been a diplomat for 30 years. He had negotiated peace treaties and trade deals across dozens of worlds. He had believed in the galactic community, in the idea that different species could work together for the common good. That belief was dying today. "High Adjudicator, members of the council," he began, his voice carrying across the chamber. "You are making a terrible mistake. Humanity has followed every law, honored every agreement, and contributed to this council with honesty and good faith. These charges are false, and you know it. The evidence against us is manufactured. This is not justice. This is politics." Several council members shifted in their seats. A few looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. "You fear us because we are advancing too quickly," Daniel continued. "Because in 50 years, we have accomplished what took your civilization centuries. You fear competition. You fear change. So you have chosen to remove us rather than adapt to a new reality." Scales rippled with what Daniel had learned to recognize as amusement. "You accuse this council of fear. How human. You barely understand the galaxy, yet you think yourselves equal to species who crossed the stars while your ancestors lived in caves." "We are equal," Daniel said firmly, "and someday you will regret treating us as anything less." "Is that a threat, Ambassador?" "No, it is a fact." The vote came quickly after that. 43 species voted to banish humanity from galactic society. Only 4 voted against the measure. It was overwhelming and brutal. The terms were harsh. All human colonies outside the Sol system would be abandoned within 1 Earth year. Every trading post, every diplomatic station, every settlement beyond their home system had to be evacuated. Trade sanctions would be imposed immediately. Any human ship found outside Sol space after the deadline would be destroyed without warning. Daniel listened to each term with his face carefully neutral. Inside, he felt like he was watching his life's work burn to ash. Behind him, he heard Sophie's quiet intake of breath. Brooks stood up, his chair scraping loudly across the floor, but Sophie grabbed his arm and pulled him back down. When the sentencing finished, Daniel bowed slightly. It was a gesture of respect he no longer felt but performed anyway. The people of Earth will comply with your terms. We will withdraw from all territories and stations. We will close our borders and cease all contact with the galactic community. Very wise, said. Perhaps in a few centuries, if you survive your isolation, you might petition to rejoin as a minor client state of the. Several species laughed at that. The sound echoed through the chamber like breaking glass. Daniel turned and walked back to his delegation. Sophie and Brooke stood immediately, gathering their materials. The three of them walked toward the exit, their footsteps the only sound now that the laughter had died. As they reached the massive doors, Daniel paused and looked back. The council members were already talking among themselves, moving on to other business. To them, humanity was already forgotten, a minor problem solved. Met his eyes across the distance and raised one clawed hand in a mocking salute. Daniel said nothing. He simply turned and walked through the doors. In the corridor outside, Brooks finally spoke. Sir, this is wrong. We should fight this. We should. We will fight, Daniel interrupted quietly. But not here, not now. We go home, we close our borders, and we prepare. Prepare for what? Sophie asked. Daniel looked at both of them. He was 63 years old, probably too old to see what came next, but he knew it would come. Prepare for the day we return, and when we do, it will not be as beggars asking for acceptance. It will be on our terms. The three of them walked through the station toward the docking bays where the human ships waited. Around them, aliens from dozens of species went about their business. Some stared at the humans as they passed. Others carefully looked away, perhaps ashamed of what had happened. By the time they reached their ship, news of the banishment had spread throughout the station. As they boarded, Daniel could feel eyes on his back. Let them watch, he thought. Let them remember this day, because humans never forgot an injustice and they never failed to answer one. The ship undocked and turned toward empty space. Behind them, Zenith Prime Station grew smaller, its lights fading into the darkness. Ahead lay the long journey home to Earth, to Sol, to the only system humanity could now call their own. Daniel sat in his cabin and began writing his final report. The Council had cast them out. They had made humanity into exiles in a galaxy that should have been open to all species. They thought humans would fade away, weakened by isolation and forgotten by history. They were wrong. Daniel did not write that last part. He did not need to. Every human who heard about this day would feel the same fire he felt now, the same determination, the same certainty that this was not the end of humanity's story in the galaxy. It was only the beginning. 50 years had passed since the banishment. Peter Morgan stood in the underground research facility on Luna, Earth's moon, and watched through the reinforced window as the test began. He was 81 years old now, his hair completely white, his hands marked with age spots, but his mind remained sharp, and his eyes were bright with the fire that had kept him working all these decades. The test chamber below held humanity's latest achievement, a drive system that would change everything. Beginning activation sequence, a voice said over the intercom. Peter recognized it as belonging to Hayes, one of the younger engineers. She was only 30, born years after the isolation began. She had never seen an alien, never traveled beyond the Sol system. None of her generation had, but they worked with the same dedication as those who remembered what had been taken from them. The device in the chamber began to glow. Energy readings spiked across the monitors. Then, in a flash of light that made Peter squint despite the protective glass, the device vanished. For 3 seconds the chamber was empty. Then it reappeared exactly where it had been. "Jump successful," said, and Peter could hear the smile in her voice. Target coordinates matched perfectly. No temporal drift. Energy consumption 30% below projected levels. Peter allowed himself a small smile. They had done it. A quantum jump drive that needed no hyperspace beacons, no council-controlled infrastructure. Humans could now travel anywhere in the galaxy without asking permission from anyone. He turned away from the window and walked through the facility's corridors. This place had become his home over the past decades. After the banishment, he had been working at a council research station, studying advanced physics. When Earth recalled all its citizens, he had come home angry and bitter. But that anger had transformed into something more useful: purpose. The facility was vast, carved deep into Luna's rock. Thousands of people worked here in shifts that never stopped. They were building the future. Not just jump drives, but weapons, shields, construction systems, medical technology. Everything humanity needed to stand on its own. Peter took an elevator to the command level and entered the main operations center. Admiral Lisa was there, studying a holographic display that showed ship construction progress. She was 53, tall and stern, with short gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been a captain when the banishment happened. Now she commanded all of Earth's military forces. "Peter," she said without looking away from the display, "I heard about the test. Congratulations." "Thank you, Admiral. We can begin installing them in the fleet within 6 months." "Good, we will need them soon." She gestured to the hologram. "The shipyards at Mars completed another 2 vessels today. That brings us to 48 combat ships, another 100 transports and support craft, plus the dreadnought." Peter looked at the largest ship in the display, the Valiant Dawn. It was enormous, larger than anything the Council had ever built according to their intelligence. It had been under construction for 12 years, built in secret in the asteroid belt where no outside observers could see it. "When do we go back?" Peter asked. "Aaron thinks we are ready," Lisa said. "He has been analyzing Council military movements for years. They have not advanced at all. No new ship designs. No new weapons. They grew comfortable and stopped innovating." Aaron Grant entered the operations center as if summoned by hearing his name. He was the head of Earth's intelligence service, a position that had become crucial during the isolation. He carried a data pad and looked tired. He always looked tired these days. "I have the latest reports from our observation posts," Aaron said. "The galaxy is not doing well. They have become more oppressive. They control 70% of all trade now. Smaller species are being pressured to accept unfair agreements. Several have been threatened with the same treatment we received if they refuse to comply." "Any resistance?" Lisa asked. "Some, but nothing organized. Everyone is afraid." Aaron pulled up files on his pad. "There have been 3 minor conflicts in the past decade. The Council sent peacekeeping forces to suppress them. Peace, in this case, meaning forcing the weaker side to surrender." Peter felt old anger stir in his chest. The Council had claimed to represent justice and equality, but without humanity to challenge their authority, they had become exactly what they had accused humans of being: aggressive, domineering, interested only in maintaining their own power. "There is more," Aaron continued. "We have intercepted communications suggesting some younger species want to develop technologies the Council has forbidden: jump drives, advanced weapons, self-sufficient systems. The Council is preventing them from advancing, keeping them dependent and weak." Lisa's expression hardened. "Then we have a responsibility to act. We developed these technologies because we had no choice. We were cut off, isolated, forced to survive on our own. These species are being deliberately held back." "Are we ready to reveal ourselves?" Peter asked. "Once we step back into the galaxy, there is no going back to hiding." "We have been ready for years," Lisa said firmly. "We have the technology, the ships, the trained personnel. What we lacked was certainty that we were doing the right thing. Now we have it. The galaxy needs someone to stand up to the Council's corruption. It might as well be us." She turned to Aaron. "Send a message to Ambassador Carter. Tell him it is time." Peter had not seen Daniel Carter in person for many years, though they communicated regularly. Carter had retired from active diplomacy but remained humanity's most experienced voice in galactic affairs. He lived on Earth now, in a small house by the ocean, writing and consulting. But everyone knew that when humanity returned to the stars, Carter would lead them. 2 days later, Peter stood on the bridge of the Valiant Dawn. The ship was ready for its first real voyage. Around it, dozens of other human vessels waited in formation. They had launched from their hidden bases throughout the Sol system and gathered here, beyond Neptune's orbit, where Earth's sun was just a bright star among many. Admiral sat in the command chair, her posture relaxed but her eyes alert. The bridge crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. These were professionals who had trained their entire careers for this moment. Daniel Carter stood beside Lisa's chair. He had come aboard an hour ago, looking older but no less determined than the day he had left the council chamber half a century before. He wore a simple suit rather than a military uniform. He was here as Earth's voice, not its warrior. "All ships report ready, Admiral," someone announced. "Very well." Lisa touched a control on her chair's armrest. "This is Admiral to all vessels. Today we return to the galaxy, not as refugees seeking acceptance, not as supplicants begging for a place at the table. We return as equals, as a free people claiming our right to exist among the stars. We will offer peace to those who want it, but we will bow to no one. Is that understood?" A chorus of acknowledgments came through the communication system. Lisa looked at Carter. "Ambassador, would you like to say anything?" Carter shook his head. "No speeches. We have talked enough over the years. Now we act. Let them see what humanity has become." "Jump coordinates locked in," the navigation officer reported. "Destination, threshold system, unclaimed space, approximately 200 light-years from Sol." "Then let us go home to the galaxy," Lisa said. "All ships execute jump on my mark. 3, 2, 1 mark." The universe twisted around them. Peter felt a moment of disorientation as the quantum drive engaged. It was different from the old hyperspace jumps he remembered from his time on the council station. Faster, cleaner, more precise. When reality reasserted itself, they were no longer in Sol's outer reaches. They hung in space near a yellow star with 6 planets. Long-range sensors immediately began detecting other ships in the system, merchant vessels, a few small patrol craft, none of them human. "Begin broadcasting," Lisa ordered. "Open channel all frequencies, every language in the council database." Carter stepped forward and faced the communication pickup. When he spoke, his voice was transmitted across the entire system, ensuring that everyone would hear humanity's message. "This is Ambassador Daniel Carter of Earth, speaking on behalf of humanity. 50 years ago, we were banished from galactic society on false charges. We were told to retreat to our home system and never return. Today, we reject that unjust sentence. Humanity has returned to the stars. We claim this system for development and colonization. We offer peace and cooperation to all species, but we will defend our rights and our people with every means at our disposal. This is not a request for permission. This is a statement of fact. Humanity is back." The message ended. For a long moment, there was silence on the bridge as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Then the responses began flooding in. The Galactic Council received the message 3 hours after it was broadcast. By then, human ships had appeared in 12 different systems simultaneously. Not invading, not attacking, simply appearing, announcing their presence, and beginning their operations as if they had every right to be there. On Zenith Prime Station, the council chamber erupted into chaos. High Adjudicator slammed his clawed hand against his podium. "This is an outrage. They were banished. They have no authority to return." But the representatives of the council were not looking at him. They were watching the data streams coming in from across the galaxy. Human ships that moved faster than anything they had seen before. Energy signatures that suggested weapons far more powerful than Council standard. And most disturbing of all, the humans seemed completely self-sufficient. They were not asking for trade, not requesting resources. They needed nothing from the Council at all. Sophie Clark, who had been Daniel Carter's aide 50 years ago, now stood as Earth's ambassador to the reformed diplomatic channels. She transmitted a formal message to the Council from a small human diplomatic vessel. Her hair was gray now, but her voice was steady and clear. The Galactic Council banished humanity without just cause. We were accused of crimes we did not commit. We were isolated and cut off from galactic society. You expected us to wither and die. Instead, we thrived. We developed our own technologies, built our own fleets, and created our own path forward. We are not returning to beg for acceptance. We are returning because the galaxy belongs to all species, not just those who hold power in the Council. Sent an immediate response. You will cease all operations and withdraw to Sol immediately. Any failure to comply will be met with military force. Sophie's reply came back within minutes. We respectfully decline. Humanity is here to stay. In the threshold system, Captain Jake stood on the bridge of the Valiant Dawn and watched the colony ship begin its approach to the fourth planet. The world was beautiful, with blue oceans and green continents. Scans showed it had a breathable atmosphere and no intelligent native life. It was perfect for human settlement. Tors led the colony mission. She was a civilian, not military, but she had volunteered to be among the first humans to establish a new home beyond Sol in half a century. Her ship, the New Dawn, carried 10,000 colonists and enough equipment to build a functioning settlement within months. Captain's voice came over the communication channel. We are beginning our descent. See you on the surface. Good luck down there. We will keep watch. Jake meant it literally. The Valiant Dawn and 3 escort ships remained in orbit, their sensors sweeping constantly for threats. They all knew the Council would respond. The only question was how aggressive that response would be. The answer came 2 days later. Aaron Grant's intelligence network detected a fleet assembling at their nearest military base. 20 warships, all heavy cruisers and destroyers. They were preparing to jump to the threshold system. Admiral received the report while touring the new colony on the planet below. The settlers had already established a base camp and were beginning construction of permanent structures. Children played in the alien grass while their parents worked. It was peaceful and hopeful, everything humanity had been for 50 years. Get me back to the Valiant Dawn, Lisa said immediately, and send a priority alert to all our ships in nearby systems. They are coming. When she reached orbit, the human fleet had already repositioned for defense. Jake had done well, placing his ships in positions that would give them maximum tactical advantage. What are your orders, Admiral? Jake asked as Lisa arrived on the bridge. We defend the colony, no retreat, but we do not fire first. Let them show the galaxy who the aggressors really are. The fleet arrived in a flash of distorted space, 20 ships against 4. On paper, it should have been an easy victory for them. Himself was commanding from the lead vessel, confident that humanity would see sense when faced with overwhelming force. He opened a communication channel. Human vessels, you are in violation of Council law. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Lisa opened a response channel. High Adjudicator, we are conducting legal colonization in unclaimed space. We have harmed no one. Leave peacefully and there will be no conflict. You were banished. You have no rights here. That unjust banishment is no longer recognized by humanity. We suggest you withdraw before this situation escalates. Cut the communication. A moment later, his fleet opened fire. The missiles came in fast, hundreds of them launched simultaneously. It was a devastating opening strike designed to cripple the human ships before they could respond. But they had no idea what human technology had become. The human point defense systems activated. Rapid-fire lasers and kinetic interceptors filled the space between the fleets. Missiles exploded long before reaching their targets. Out of 300 missiles launched, fewer than 60 made it through the defensive screen, and those that did impact harmlessly against the human shields, which absorbed the damage with barely a flicker. "Return fire," Lisa ordered calmly. "Target their weapons and engines only. I want them disabled, not destroyed." The human response was surgical and precise. Energy beams lanced across the distance, striking with accuracy that the weapons could not match. Within the first minute, 5 ships lost their main weapons. 3 more had their engines damaged. Jake watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. "Admiral, they are breaking formation. I think they expected an easy fight." "Give them a demonstration," Lisa said. "Valiant Dawn will execute Jump Strike Alpha." The massive dreadnought vanished from its position. The fleet scattered in confusion, trying to locate it. Then the Valiant Dawn appeared directly behind their formation, having jumped a distance that should have been impossible without a hyperspace beacon. It fired a single salvo that disabled 3 more ships before jumping away again. His communication channel reopened. His voice was no longer confident. "Cease fire, we are withdrawing." "Negative," Lisa replied. "You came here to attack a peaceful colony. You fired first. You do not get to leave until we say you can." But she did order her ships to stop shooting. The fleet was in chaos now, half their vessels damaged or disabled, the rest trying to regroup. They were completely outmatched and they knew it. "Your weapons are inferior," Lisa continued. "Your shields are weak. Your tactics are outdated, but we are not here to destroy you. We are here to prove a point. Humanity is no longer the species you can push around. We have grown stronger in our isolation. Now you have 2 choices. Accept that we have the right to exist among the stars or continue this fight and suffer complete defeat." Said nothing for a long moment. Then, with clear reluctance, he gave the order for his fleet to retreat. The ships that could still move jumped away. Those 2 damaged to jump sent out distress signals, knowing they had no choice but to accept human aid. "Dispatch rescue teams to the disabled vessels," Lisa ordered. "Treat their wounded and provide repairs sufficient to get them home. Show them we are not the monsters they think we are." Tors watched the battle from the surface. When it ended with no human casualties and minimal deaths, she felt relief wash over her. This could have been much worse. "Captain Kate Phillips reporting for medical duty," a voice said behind her. Kate was one of the doctors who had come with the colony. She was already gathering supplies. "I assume we will have wounded to treat." "We will," confirmed. "And we treat them as we would treat any injured person, with respect and care." Within hours, human medical teams were boarding the damaged ships. The enemy soldiers watched with confusion as humans worked to save their lives. These were the same humans who had just defeated them in combat. By every rule of war they knew, prisoners should be treated harshly. But the humans were gentle, professional, and focused only on healing. One young soldier, his scales burned from an exploding console, stared up at Kate as she treated his wounds. "Why are you helping us? We came to destroy your colony." Kate met his eyes. "Because that is what humans do. We defend ourselves when attacked, but we do not hate our enemies, and we do not let people die when we can save them." The soldier had no response to that. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than any ship could travel. Every species heard the same story. They had attacked a peaceful human colony with overwhelming force. The humans had defended themselves with technology that made the Council's military look primitive. And then, instead of destroying their defeated enemies, the humans had shown mercy. On Zenith Prime, the Council met in emergency session. Many species were demanding answers. Some were afraid of human power. Others were inspired by human restraint. The younger species, those who had been oppressed by the Council's rules, were especially vocal. "If the humans can develop such technology independently," one ambassador said, Then why are we forbidden from doing the same? The Council has kept us weak, telling us it was for our own good. But I see now it was to keep us dependent. The Council chamber descended into argument. Some species supported thee and demanded action against humanity. Others called for negotiation. A few even suggested that the Council should be reformed entirely, with human participation and input. Watched his authority crumble. The attack on the human colony had been meant to prove dominance. Instead, it had exposed their weakness and revealed the Council's corruption. For the first time in his long career, he felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Because if humanity could defeat the so easily, what else could they do that could not accept their defeat at threshold? To admit that humans were superior would mean losing the power they had held for centuries. So instead of accepting peace, they chose war. Stood before the Galactic Council 1 month after the battle. His scales had lost some of their shine, his posture was less confident than before, but his voice still carried authority when he spoke. The humans are a threat to galactic stability. They possess weapons of unknown power. They refuse to submit to Council authority. If we allow them to continue unchecked, they will dominate us all. I call for a formal declaration of war. But the response was not what he expected. No, said the ambassador, her 6 eyes blinking independently. The humans defended themselves from your attack. They showed mercy to your defeated forces. The threat I see here is not from humanity. Other species murmured agreement. The Council was fracturing. 20 species voted with the 23 voted for neutrality or peace with humanity. 4 voted to formally recognize human territorial claims. Left the chamber in fury. If the Council would not support him, he would act alone. The Imperium was still the largest military power in the galaxy. They had resources, ships, and most importantly, pride. They would crush humanity and remind everyone why they ruled. The war that followed would be remembered as one of the shortest and most one-sided conflicts in galactic history. They launched their assault on the human colony world that was now called New Haven. 3 fleets, 60 ships total, more than triple the force they had sent before. They jumped into the system with weapons armed, ready to destroy everything they found. Admiral had anticipated this. The human fleet had grown over the past month. Ships that had been hidden throughout Sol space had joined the colonies. New Haven now had 20 defending vessels, including the Valiant Dawn. But numbers were not everything. The battle began the same way as before. The launched massive missile strikes. Human point defense systems eliminated 85% of them. The remainder were absorbed by shields that had been further improved since the last engagement. Then the humans struck back. Stone was a fighter pilot, flying one of the small but deadly craft that launched from the human carriers. His squadron of 12 fighters engaged a cruiser that was trying to break through to attack the planet. "Stay tight," said over the squadron channel. "Focus fire on their shield generators." The fighters moved with precision, their targeting computers linked together for maximum effectiveness. They hit the cruiser from 6 different angles simultaneously, overloading its defenses. Within minutes, the cruiser's shields collapsed and its weapons went offline. "Cruiser is disabled," reported, "moving to next target." Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Human ships were faster, more maneuverable, and armed with weapons that punched through defenses like they were paper. But what stood out most was the precision. Humans targeted engines and weapons, disabling rather than destroying. They fought to win, not to kill. Captain Jake watched from the Valiant Dawn's bridge as the battle turned into a rout. "Admiral, the fleet is breaking apart. Half their ships are disabled. The others are attempting to retreat." "Let them go," Lisa said, "but transmit a message to their commander. Tell him we are willing to discuss terms for peace. This war does not need to continue." The commander's response was to launch one final desperate attack. His remaining ships turned and charged directly at the valiant Dawn, firing everything they had. Lisa sighed. Very well, show them what a real dreadnought can do. The valiant Dawn's main weapons powered up. The ship's entire front section glowed with gathered energy. When it fired, the beam was bright enough to be seen from the planet below. It carved through space and struck 3 ships at once, overloading their reactors and forcing them to shut down completely to avoid destruction. The attack ended. They had nothing left to fight with. All enemy vessels disabled, Admiral, Jake reported. Minimal casualties on both sides, mostly injuries, very few deaths. Good, send medical teams to assist them, again. The Second Battle of New Haven lasted less than 2 hours. When it was over, they had lost 60 ships without destroying a single human vessel. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. More species began to break away from the Council. Some declared neutrality. Others quietly approached human diplomats to discuss treaties and trade agreements. The younger species, those who had been held back by Council restrictions, were especially eager to talk. Sophie Clark found herself busier than she had been in decades. Her small diplomatic vessel became a hub of activity as ambassadors from a dozen species came to meet with her. "We want what you have," one young ambassador said bluntly. His species, were only 200 years into space travel and had been prevented by the Council from developing advanced jump drives. Independence, the ability to defend ourselves, technology that is ours, not borrowed from the Council. "We can share some of what we have learned," Sophie replied carefully. "But you must understand, we did not develop these things to threaten others. We developed them because we had no choice. Isolation forced us to innovate or die." "Then help us learn to innovate too. Teach us to stand on our own as you do." It was a conversation that repeated itself many times over the following weeks. Humanity found itself in a strange position. They had returned to the galaxy ready to fight for their freedom. Instead, they were becoming teachers and protectors for species that saw them as an alternative to the Council's control. But they were not finished. Desperate to salvage his people's reputation and power, planned one final attack, not against a colony, but against a target that would hurt humanity deeply. He ordered his forces to strike at Earth itself. It was a massive gamble. They assembled every available ship, calling in vessels from across their territory. 200 warships prepared to jump directly into the Sol system. They would destroy Earth's orbital stations, damage the planet's infrastructure, and prove that humanity was not invincible. But Aaron Grant's intelligence network learned about the plan 3 days before it was set to launch. "They are going to attack our home," Aaron told Admiral. "Everything they have all at once. They will arrive in Sol within 72 hours. Lisa looked at the intelligence report with calm eyes. She had expected something like this. They were cornered and desperate. Desperate enemies did reckless things. "Then we will meet them there, but not in Sol. We intercept them before they reach Earth." The humans had one major advantage. Their jump drives were faster and more accurate than anything they possessed. They could position themselves anywhere they wanted, whenever they wanted. The human fleet gathered at a point in deep space, between the staging area and the Sol system. 70 ships, including the Valiant Dawn and 2 other dreadnoughts that had recently been completed. When the fleet jumped toward Earth, they would find humans waiting for them. They arrived in a massive formation, 200 ships moving together like a single organism. Their commander, a younger officer named Al who had been chosen to replace the disgraced, immediately realized something was wrong. "Human ships detected," his sensor officer said. 70 vessels in defensive formation directly in our path." "How did they know?" Al demanded. But the answer did not matter. He had his orders. "All ships engage, we break through and continue to Earth." But there would be no breaking through. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations. The human fleet fought with a coordination that seemed almost impossible. Every ship knew where every other ship was. Every attack was timed to support another attack, and their technology was simply better in every measurable way. Within the first 30 minutes, 40 ships were disabled. Within an hour, that number had doubled. They kept fighting, driven by pride and desperation. But they were like ancient soldiers with swords charging against modern firearms. The outcome was never in doubt. Stone and his squadron saved a civilian transport that had been caught in the battle. The transport had been damaged by debris and was venting atmosphere. Squadron used their tractor beams to stabilize the ship and guided it to safety, even though they were technically at war. The transport's captain sent a message after they were secure. "You saved us. Why?" "Because you are not soldiers," replied simply. "You are civilians who got caught in a war you probably did not want. We fight the military. We do not harm innocents." This act, like so many others during the conflict, was recorded and transmitted across the galaxy. When the battle finally ended, the fleet was shattered. 130 ships disabled. 50 managed to retreat. 20 were destroyed, despite human efforts to avoid killing their enemies. The human fleet had taken damage but lost no ships. Al sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed his fleet scattered and broken. His career was over. His people's military reputation was destroyed, and the humans had barely worked up a sweat defeating them. Admiral's face appeared on his communication screen. She looked tired but not triumphant. There was no joy in her expression. "Commander Al, this war is over. You have fought bravely, but you cannot win. Surrender now and your people can go home. Continue fighting and more will die needlessly. Choose wisely." Al knew he had no choice. "I surrender," he said quietly. "I surrender in the name of the Imperium." 2 years after the war ended, Daniel Carter stood in a very different council chamber than the one where humanity had been banished. This new chamber was located on New Geneva Station, built by human construction in orbit around the colony world of New Haven. The design was open and welcoming, with no raised platforms or hierarchies. Every species sat at the same level. Carter was 85 years old now. His body was failing, but his mind remained clear. He had lived to see everything he had promised that day on Zenith Prime come true. Humanity had returned, and the galaxy had changed because of it. "Ambassador Carter," said the representative, her 6 eyes focused on him with respect. "You have been invited to address this reformed council. Please speak." Carter stood slowly, using a cane to support himself. Sophie Clark, sitting beside him, offered to help, but he waved her away gently. He would do this himself. "Members of the Galactic Council," he began, his voice still strong despite his age. "I stand before you not as a representative of humanity alone, but as someone who has watched this galaxy change for the better. 2 years ago, we were at war. They attacked us repeatedly, trying to enforce an unjust banishment. We defended ourselves. We won, but we did not conquer. We did not seek revenge. Instead, we sought justice." He paused, looking around the chamber. So many different species, all watching him with attention. Some had fought against humanity. Others had supported them. Many had simply tried to stay out of the conflict. All were here now, trying to build something new. "The old council was built on the idea that power meant control," Carter continued. "That the strong should rule the weak. That older civilizations had the right to restrict younger ones. This was wrong. We propose something different. A council based on cooperation, not domination. Where technology is shared freely among those who want it. Where no species can force their will on another. Where justice is the same for everyone, regardless of how powerful they are." The chamber was silent. Then one ambassador began tapping their appendage against their desk in their species' version of applause. Others joined in, creating a symphony of sounds that meant approval across dozens of different cultures. The vote came that afternoon. 40 species voted to accept the new council structure. 7 voted against, mostly the ones who had benefited from the old system. 5 abstained. It was enough. The Galactic Council was reformed. Sophie Clark was elected as the new council arbiter, a position that had not existed before. She would represent no single species, but would work to ensure fairness in all decisions. It was a human concept that other species embraced eagerly. "I hope I can live up to this responsibility," Sophie said during her acceptance speech. "I will do my best to serve all species equally, to listen to every voice, and to ensure that what happened to humanity never happens to anyone else." They were not destroyed by their defeat. Their military was shattered and their territory reduced, but they were not punished beyond what was necessary. Human diplomats worked with civilians to establish a new government, one that was more democratic and less aggressive. Himself faced trial for war crimes. Not human justice, but a neutral tribunal that included representatives from multiple species. He was found guilty of fabricating evidence against humanity and of ordering attacks on civilian targets during the war. He was sentenced to imprisonment, not execution. Even in victory, humans insisted on mercy. Admiral Lisa oversaw the creation of the Human Defense Initiative, a military force that existed not to conquer but to protect. When a young species, came under attack from pirates, human ships responded to their distress call. When the colonies faced food shortages due to crop failures, human transports delivered supplies without asking for payment. "We are strong enough to help," Lisa said when asked why humanity was so generous. "And if we have the power to help, we have the responsibility to do so." Peter Morgan's research teams began sharing their technology with allied species. Not weapons, but tools for development. Better agriculture systems, more efficient energy production, medical advances that saved millions of lives. The technologies that had kept humanity alive during isolation now helped others thrive. But humanity was careful. They did not simply give everything away. Species who wanted advanced technology had to demonstrate they would use it responsibly. Jump drives were only shared with those who had stable governments and peaceful intentions. Weapons were never shared at all. Humans had learned that power without wisdom was dangerous. The human empire, as some species called it, was not really an empire at all. It was a confederation of independent colonies spread across 40 systems. New Haven, New Terra, Liberty Station, dozens of worlds and habitats where humans built new homes, and around these human settlements, other species came to live and trade. The colonies were diverse and welcoming. Aliens walked the streets of New Haven's capital city alongside humans. Mixed species crews worked on ships and stations. Children of different species played together, learning that their differences were interesting rather than threatening. Amy Watson was one of these children who grew up during the post-war years. She was 23 now, a junior officer in the Exploration Service. She had been born during the isolation years, never met an alien until she was 10 years old. Now she commanded a small exploration vessel called the Pioneer. "Captain Watson," her sensor officer said, "we are receiving a distress signal from the system ahead. Source is unknown." Amy leaned forward in her chair. "Unknown? What species?" "Computer cannot identify them. The language is not in our database. They may be a species that has never had contact with the galactic community." This was exactly what Amy's mission was about. The Exploration Service traveled to distant regions of space, looking for isolated species who might want to join the galactic community. But unlike the old council, humans offered choice. If a species wanted to remain isolated, that desire was respected. "Approach carefully," Amy ordered. "Prepare first contact protocols, and someone find me a linguist. We have a new language to learn." The Pioneer entered the unknown system and found a primitive space station in orbit around the third planet. The beings inside were reptilian, smaller than humans but clearly intelligent. Their technology was basic, barely capable of space travel, but they had sent out a distress call asking for help. Amy led the first contact team herself. She wore no weapons, only a translation device, and hoped that universal gestures of peace would be understood. When she met the alien leader, a small female with golden scales, she offered an open hand. "My name is Amy Watson. I come from humanity. We received your call for help. What do you need?" The alien stared at the human hand for a moment, then carefully touched it with her own clawed hand. "You came. You actually came. We thought we were alone." "No one is alone," Amy said gently. "Not anymore." Back on New Geneva Station, Daniel Carter sat in a small garden that had been built in the station's observation dome. Through the transparent ceiling, he could see the stars and the ships that moved between them. So many ships now. Human vessels, merchants, explorers, even a few traders who had chosen peace over pride. Sophie found him there, as she often did in the evenings. She sat beside him on the bench without speaking at first. They had been friends for 60 years. Sometimes words were not necessary. "How are you feeling?" she finally asked. "Old," Carter admitted with a slight smile. "Ready to rest, but satisfied. We did it, Sophie. We created something better." "You created it," she corrected. "You believed in it even when it seemed impossible." "I believed in humanity," he said. "In our ability to overcome injustice and to choose the harder right over the easier wrong. We could have returned as conquerors. We had the power. But we chose to be something better, to be teachers and protectors instead of rulers." He looked at the ships moving through space. "This is not an empire built on conquest, Sophie. It is built on an idea. The idea that all species deserve freedom and justice. That power should serve others, not dominate them. That is what will last long after we are gone." Sophie reached over and took his hand. "Then we succeeded beyond our dreams." They sat together in silence, watching the galaxy they had helped reshape. Somewhere out there, Amy Watson was making first contact with a species that had never known they were part of something larger. Somewhere else, human and alien engineers were working together to build new wonders. And throughout it all, the principles humanity had fought for were spreading like seeds on the wind. Justice, freedom, cooperation, mercy. These were the foundations of the new galactic order. Not an empire of territory and subjects, but an empire of ideas and values. Daniel Carter closed his eyes, content. They had been banished as outcasts. They had returned as the galaxy's conscience. And that, he knew with certainty, was far more powerful than any fleet of warships or conquered worlds. The galaxy had tried to push humanity away, but humanity had pushed back, not with anger but with ideals. They had shown that strength without wisdom was just brutality, that power without compassion was just tyranny, and that true leadership meant serving others, not ruling them. The humans had been told they did not belong among the stars. They had proven that wrong in the most profound way possible, not by forcing their way in, but by making the galaxy better by being part of it. The old council had feared what humanity might become. They had been right to fear, but not because humans would conquer them. Because humans would change everything. And 2 years after the war ended, with new colonies growing, new species joining the galactic community by choice, and justice replacing oppression across hundreds of worlds, it was clear that the change was only beginning. Humanity had returned to the stars. And the stars would never be the same.